When I was a child, one of my favorite television programs was The Muppet Show. Every night before I went to bed, I would tune to the show. I would always get excited when my favorite character, Kermit, appeared. Right after dinner one night, I turned in to see the green frog, always brought a smile to my face. The show started out normal, but Kermit was introducing a special guest star. However, things turned out a little strange when Kermit introduced the special guest as Satan. Instead of the happy, normal singing, there was no sound at all. Instead, the camera just faded to black at a white doorway, and as the camera inched closer and closer, I began to hear small bits of white noise. It then cuts to a scene of Kermit, in front of what seems to be the standard red meteor curtains. There were several things out of place. However, Kermit's head seemed to be warped and longer than usual. The colors he was composed were now different and darker. The bricks were also covered with very bright substance, but to which it seemed to be carelessly splattered about on the wall. Kermit didn't say anything about it. Instead, he just stared blankly at the camera, barely moving. I'm not quite sure how long the scene lasted, but to me it seemed like to go on forever. Finally, the scene transitioned to a dimly lit room, which appeared to be someone else's attic. The film was in black and white again, and the only source of light coming from was behind some boxes in the back. The room was very dirty, and it had random objects scattered across the floor. There was an old projector toppled over in the middle of the room as well. I stared at the projector for a bit, until something suddenly moved behind it. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. An overstretched, limbless, and a filthy Kermit puppet was being dragged slowly across the floor by an unseen string. It looked lifeless, until I had heard the head begin to cane towards the camera, and even though no one was puppeteering it, it took ages for the poor frog's gaze to finally reach me. But as soon as it did, the program cut to static. I sat there in silence, frozen by fright, and staring at my TV to this day. I still don't have a clue what happened that night. The Muppet Show will always be my favorite of television shows, but it will never be quite the same because of that fearful night. And that, my little pretties, was Satan on the Muppet Show. A Muppet Show lost episode creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story. This story, I think it's an okay story. I mean, it's maybe, not the best story. It did have cliches in this story and all that, but there was no hyper-realistic stuff in it, which I will have to say I'm really glad there's no hyper-realistic blood or gore or anything like that. But I know this is like a very older story. I do remember some shy guy read this story back 8 years ago, as well as Creepypasta Project and a few others. But I kind of want to sit there and, read this story for myself. I mean, because I haven't read this story in like a while. I think the last night time it did happen, I think I was busy or something. I can't really exactly remember, but it did somewhat have like an interesting concept. Now, yeah, I could definitely say right now this story was definitely a pretty interesting creepypasta. But of course, it honestly was a pretty interesting story for what it is. So I could definitely say it's still a really well made, interesting story. I mean, the grammar was pretty good and all that, as well as the sentence structure and all that. But of course, that's just what it is. This story honestly provides a pretty good concept for what this story is. So I definitely gotta say it's a really well made concept for how this story is. I mean, it does have somewhat of an interesting, feel to this story. But I do remember this one, Satan on the Muppet Show, being, I mean, I've seen Dave read this story as well. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and read this story. I mean, the story is not bad, but I mean, it's an older one, so I'm willing to give it that. I mean, if the cliches were not there or something, especially with the Satan one, it would honestly, I don't even know what I would think about this story. Now, yeah, I'm going to definitely say, since this is an older story, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt on that. So, there's definitely that. So, I mean, I find this to be an okay story. Maybe not the best, but definitely not terrible. Also, to the offer of the story, if you want to, comment in the comments below, let me know who you are. I'll be sure to give you proper credit if I find out who you are. So then that way, I'll be sure to give you proper credit then. So with that being the case, and that being said, I guess I'm going to sit here and just say this is just simply my own personal opinion. And if you happen to disagree with me, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these stories, and this is just my own thoughts. I'm gonna give this story at least a 7 out of 10. Not a bad story, but definitely not great. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's an older story, so I'm willing to give it that. It's an older story, but I know it's a bit cliched, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, especially now looking at it for the first time in a few years. I think I read this back in 2019, but now I gave it a reread, so it honestly, this is definitely something. I mean, it's not a bad story, but definitely not terrible either. So, yeah. So I guess with that being the case and that being said, what did you guys personally think of this story? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you're new to my channel, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, ring the bells for notifications to when I upload. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, and like always, please roll the outro because I'm out.